It may be taking a while. I will say this again when we are live. There was an update last night, so Teams isn't actually responding terribly well this morning, just as my permit didn't either first thing. We are now live. Right, good morning, everybody. We will hopefully get through the meeting without losing Teams to the big wide world. If we do, it's because we've had a Teams update and we'll get back on immediately. But there is a caveat in this now that the meeting will continue to be legal, even if we've gone offline momentarily. Hopefully it's all been patched up and everything's working, just as my permit was working again this morning. So, right, let's move on to the meeting. I have apologies from David Basmer, and Tom Davies will be deputising for him. Of course, he can't vote, but he can actually make statements because he's very involved in the portfolio, which he will be doing this morning. So, can I have any declarations of interest, please, other than those that you've already declared? Right, thank you. We then move to the minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March 2026 as a correct record. Is there any? Yes. Okay. Thank you. They're seconded. I will therefore assume that they have been adopted. Public question time. We've only had one this morning, and that's from Andrew Skiert about Canovi, and the response is from Councillor James Owen. After him is going to read it.
Thank you. The question is this. The council founded its wholly owned building development company, Canovi Development Limited, CDL, and tasked its housing supervisory board members to oversee its aims, including providing revenue for the council. So far, with an investment in excess of 75 million (loans, startup and running costs, and free 5 sites value), revenue has only been 0.44 million through rental income. Housing Supervisory Board members were constantly reassured that the plan's agreed target of 582 homes was being met until, at its meeting of the 19th of March 2026, CDL announced the total was to be reduced by almost 10% to 532 homes due to a woolly explanation of reflected updated viability and scheme changes. Less than a week later, there was an unscheduled Housing Supervisory Board meeting before its next scheduled meeting on the 4th of June. During this meeting on the 25th of March, a new business plan was discussed, but there is nothing for the public to see what the discussions and plans were. There are now 2 planned CDL sites at Shrewsbury and Oswestry, totaling 606 homes, with the Oswestry site being possibly financed by a £1 million grant from the WMHA. What will it gain if the grant is made? Therefore, was CDL transparent about its current financial position when it gained council support (brackets and free sites) for the two new schemes and a possible grant from WMHA, and can CDL be trusted to provide the number of homes it has promised, as it has fallen short on its existing plans numbers?
Okay, Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Quay Development Limited was established as a wholly owned council company to support housing delivery and regeneration, with oversight currently provided by the Housing Supervisory Board. The original business plan approved in March 25, a forecast delivery of 582 homes. This was revised to 532 homes following updated viability assessments, planning constraints and market conditions, and this change was formally reported to the HSB in line with agreed regular financial and performance monitoring arrangements. Homes continue to be delivered, with a significant number completed or on site. Some HSB discussions and business plan details are not published, as they contain commercially sensitive information, which is standard practice to protect the council's financial interests. The meeting held on the 25th of March was such a meeting. However, the final CDL business plan will come to full council for sign-off in the future. In terms of loan financing, CDL has access to a total loan facility of 69 million. This is split between financing available for development of 39 million and financing available for retaining private rental sector stock of 30 million, each attracting a different independently assessed interest rate. Currently, a total of 35.19 million is outstanding on this loan. This is split between 12.845 million used for development finance and 22.345 million used for PRS finance. The business plan shows that this can be repaid in full with interest over the business plan period. At the Q3 point, CDL has generated the following cash returns to the council: 7 million in capital receipts, 5 million interest receipts, where rental income pays the interest costs. So that's a total of £12 million in total cash benefits to the council. We assume that the bid referred to in the question relates to the West Midlands Combined Authority element of the National Affordable Homes Programme launched by Homes England. This funding provides government grant to support the delivery of affordable housing, including social rent, affordable rent and shared ownership, where homes cannot be delivered by the market alone. The programme helps improve scheme viability, reduce financial risk and increase the supply of generally affordable homes aligned to local housing needs. No bid has yet been submitted, although access to funding such as this is in line with the council's priorities and aims around housing and has been considered for a range of schemes, not all via CDL. Revised delivery forecasts are part of responsible governance, and CDL remains an important vehicle for increasing housing supply in Shropshire, where market delivery alone is unlikely to deliver for local need. Because CDL is wholly owned, the council is permitted under local government legislation to dispose of land to its own company, provided statutory and governance requirements are met. Land transfers to CDL follow a formal framework approved by full council on the 17th of December 2020. Importantly, CDL does not receive land automatically. Each site requires a separate cabinet report and approval, and is usually sold, not gifted. Under Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972, councils must normally achieve best consideration or market value when disposing of land. Regarding CDL, independent valuation advice is obtained, and any undervalue must be explicitly justified as a well-being or regeneration disposal. Cabinet reports and scrutiny documents confirm that the council treats these as formal property disposals and not internal transfers. Thank you.
Yes, I don't take it there is no supplementary. Tim is not aware of one, so thank you very much. In which case we now move on to member question time. We have two of those. And the first one is from Councillor Alan Holford, and Tim Culler will read this one as well. And this is about speed limit reductions.
Okay. Shropshire has 3,300 miles of roads. Increased vehicle performance, higher traffic volumes and additional housing on rural routes have left some roads subject to the national speed limit, where a lower limit is widely regarded as more appropriate. Two clear examples in my ward are the conjoined hamlets of Barker's Green and Aston, and the hamlet of Newtown. respect of Barker's Green and Aston, I've received 7 requests from residents for a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There was a fatal accident involving a child pedestrian in 1983, and since then there have been several minor accidents and near misses involving pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. The route is used by walkers, runners and cyclists, and reducing speeds would improve safety while aligning with local and national active travel objectives. Newtown, this village includes a primary school and a dense concentration of housing along the main road. A 20-mile-an-hour limit is most appropriate here. Children are exposed to significant risks, both danger of collision and air pollution from accelerating vehicles, particularly as it is located close to a junction. I'd therefore like to ask whether Cabinet will commit to investigating reductions of legacy national speed limits where there is a clear demand from residents. How long is the process of investigation, planning and implementation? Finally, can the Highways Department take account of local knowledge and community concern alongside speed data, which may rely on limited surveys and fail to capture occasional but dangerous fast driving experienced by residents?
Thank you very much. And I think Rob Wilson will be answering this.
Yeah, I'm responding on behalf of Councillor David Vasma, who's not with us today. So where it refers to I'm referring to Councillor Vasma. The Council has recently submitted its draft proposal for the next 4 years of transport funding, the Department for Transport. The submission includes commitment to review rural speed limits in Shropshire. The proposal will begin in earnest in 2026, but given the size and scale of the project, it is anticipated this will extend into 2027. The results of which will be committed to a future delivery programme. I would ensure the 2 locations proposed by the member for Wem is given due consideration as part of that discussion. In the meantime, I will ask the Service Director for Infrastructure for any information on existing or current planned traffic operations in Newtown and Barker's Green and Aston. The traffic team will conduct the necessary studies and capture any local knowledge offered, such as the comments made by the member for Wem. When those studies are complete, I will let the member for Wem know and outline our future plans. And it is worth adding that since this response was written, the government has published its National Integrated Transport Strategy, which they call Better Connected. And in that, they have committed to reviewing the guidance on setting local speed limits, which should enable councils, I hope, to make it easier to adjust speed limits to be more appropriate.
That will be very useful because it's costly at the present time and actually quite lengthily drawn out. So if the government does something around that, it will be a very useful step forward. Thank you. And Alan's not here, so I take it we have no supplementary to that one. Second question is from Councillor Harry Hancock Davis, and that's about pedestrian crossings near Shillingston Drive. And Dawn, I think, will read that question for us.
Thank you. For years, residents in Battlefield have repeatedly raised concerns about the complete lack of a safe pedestrian crossing near Shillingston Drive, particularly for families and residents crossing between the Berwick Grange and Archery Fields estates and the bus stops near the Red Lion pub on Battlefield Road. This is not a luxury request, it is a basic public safety issue. Children are having to cross a busy road to catch the school bus, whilst elderly residents, parents with pushchairs and other bus users are left to take their chances because the council has failed year after year to provide even the most basic crossing infrastructure in an area where it is plainly needed. If the council can always find money for consultants, strategies and pet projects, why can it never seem to deliver straightforward, common sense safety measures for ordinary people? Will the portfolio holder now commit to a highway safety assessment at Shillingston Drive, including traffic speeds, vehicle flows, pedestrian demand and school travel movements, and more importantly, confirm when the council will finally stop delaying and deliver a proper pedestrian crossing at this location? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Rob Wilson will also reply to this.
Yeah, once again, reading on behalf of Councillor Vasma. The new administration recognised that core services have not been prioritised and resourced appropriately in the past, and that is something we are focusing on addressing. Road safety is just one area, particularly the safety of vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and children. It is of paramount importance to this administration, so I will ensure this matter is given the attention it deserves. I request that the Service Director for Infrastructure undertakes the necessary studies required for the assessment of a new control crossing on Battlefield Road near its junction with Shillington Drive. In particular, I will ask that traffic speeds, often well above the 30-mile-an-hour limit, are taken into account, and the dangers for school students crossing the road to catch buses opposite the Red Lion pub. I'll report back to the member for Battlefield the outcome of these studies and our future plans.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. My only other question at this stage is, will the Cabinet member please provide a specific date by which you will report back to the local member, please?
I can't on behalf of Councillor Vasma, but I'm sure he'll do so as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. And these questions always allow me to learn things too, which is really useful. Okay, we now move on to scrutiny items. And the first one of those is part 1 report of the Community Infrastructure Levy Task and Finish Group. And I ask Greg Ebbs, Chair of the Task and Finish, to come forward to present.
Thank you very much. So just going ahead, I have 5 minutes to speak, do I, Chair? Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
I won't keep you to anything.
Okay, no worries. Thank you very much. So because of the complexity of the report, what I'll do is I'll outline the reasons behind the formation of a SIL working group. Then I'll just simply briefly explain how we sort of culminated into certain decisions and the members were involved and the witnesses, and then I'll do the breakdown along with, following that, the recommendations by transformation and improvement with slight amendments to the existing report. So for starters, I would just like to explain that the SIL process is a particularly complex procedure. There's a certain lack of understanding by general members, by general public, and the group was formed to try and remove the veil off this very complex process. The reasons behind the SIL task and finish is very much associated with the fact that we have significant amount of money which are unspent. We don't have, many members didn't fully understand the reason behind, so the reasons behind the decision making, who was responsible for decision making, and therefore our task and finish has come back with a series of recommendations on improving the oversight of this very mysterious group, which we all hear about frequently in planning. Our group is a cross-party collaboration with various councillors from across the board, of which also Dawn, I've invited her to attend as a witness to these sessions to take on board, because she also operates the working with parish councils task and finish. Over the process of 5 to 6 months, we've interviewed close to 20 witnesses. Many interviewees we've interviewed multiple times, and we've also interviewed members from 3 unitary authorities. The key case examples would be Shropshire, of course, East Cheshire and Cornwall. To clarify before I go into the recommendations, I will just clarify that East Cheshire, if you've got a ruler, is on one side of a ruler and Cornwall is on the other side. East Cheshire make decision makings centrally. They have very little council involvement, and they deal with large infrastructure projects. So we've looked at that end. And then from the Cornwall perspective, they are much more, the Cabinet has much more involvement with the process. So in Cheshire, there is no Cabinet involvement, it's just officers led. In Cornwall, there's a strategy document which is presented by Cabinet at Cornwall, and there's also a lot more member involvement, a lot more transparency in the process. And this ultimately led to a series of recommendations, which I'll briefly outline. And then following those recommendations, which I outline, I'll just mention slight amendments or the opinion of transformation and improvement following that. So, taking into account members have had a good look at the report, I'll go to recommendation 1. The recommendation 1 was the consideration of revision of a 90-10 split between SIL local and SIL strategic. After a series of very tense debates, there was a significant amount of conversation about possibility of a 60-40 or a 70-30 split, but ultimately the task and finish could not agree on a recommendation unanimously. And I think the reason is behind this decision, very much associated with the fact that SIL doesn't just necessarily fund planning processes, but also 60% of the applications which go to the Community Infrastructure Group, which is headed by Eddie West, which is a series of officers who make decision makings, actually comes from highways and other projects. So it's important to know that all portfolio holders, all departments have involvement in SIL in some capacity, and therefore we felt that Cabinet would potentially be better informed, given that they have a better understanding of the strategic direction of where they would like the council to go. And therefore, our recommendation was very much that Cabinet should go away from this and have a series of discussions amongst themselves in which they've been informed by our task and finish of the complexities of the process, and taking into account further information which they have, they would be able to make, they would be the best authority to make an ongoing decision. I also think it's recommendation 1 also feeds into later recommendations, which I'll briefly outline, but I'll explain in more detail, which is the potential formation of a strategy document, which will ultimately feed into that 70-30 or 60-40 split, whatever Cabinet would like. If you're forming a strategy document, then the amount of central SIL which goes into local and strategic infrastructure is very much reliant or dependent on the two are very related in that respect. Now, with regards to TNI largely was in support of the review to consider a change of split, provided the towns and communities were not negatively impacted. This is an important factor. But we're also particularly concerned on the impact of demand resulting from neighbouring developments and how local impact is evidenced. Conversations which are had in TNI were very much associated with if, for example, a project, as purely as an example, took place in Bridgenorth, to what extent would it impact Shrewsbury, or to what extent would a project in Shrewsbury impact Bridgenorth? But this would be applicable for all sort of SIL projects, and that was simply just a general example to inform members. So the point which we're trying to make is there were concerns that borders were fluid and therefore place plans were not necessarily as rigid as one would like to outline. Now, recommendation 2. An annual SIL strategy is what I've briefly outlined, which is the task and finish group recommend that the overall direction, the prioritisation of SIL strategic and local may be subject to an annual strategy document that is developed by Cabinet and agreed by full council. This will be implemented by officers through the internal infrastructure group. In short, generally supported, beneficial in that it adds transparency and openness into the process, could add in town and parish comms. So in short, TNI were in favour of this, and there were very few amendments to recommendation 2, which TNI took away. They were also supportive of it because it helps in tracking projects underway and providing timeframes and useful KPIs. Recommendation 3. The task and finish group asked for a Cabinet review of the decision-making structure of the IIG by amending its composition to allow more member insight. It is recommended that Cabinet and portfolio holders should be invited to observe IIG meetings. Before COVID, IIG meetings took place in person. They've since been taking place on Teams. So potentially there's a conversation to be had which they could be recorded. IIG quarterly meetings, annual statements, 4 minutes and actions should be routinely shared with Cabinet and portfolio holders. This is not a process which takes place as it stands. The meetings are very much closed meetings in which there's an annual document which is presented every year, but there's clearly a lack of transparency to all those involved. IIG meetings minutes should be formal. We've had examples, we've had copies of the various documents, we've had the infrastructure list, we've had minutes from their IIG meetings, and there's a lack of formality, there's a lack of process, and this is important because if we want to improve the transparency of the process, it needs to be formalised, and those decisions also need to be clearly outlined for all to see. Reporting should also include the outcome and completion of previous SIL-funded projects, as well as applications have been unsuccessful together, with an explanation of why. So I will just sort of outline a couple of points TNI commented. TNI ultimately said that they very much in support of what we recommended, but they'd like it to go further, and that IIG agendas, quarterly reports, actions, it should also be provided a relevant overview and scrutiny committees and to audit and governance. Therefore, the mechanism will be made available to all members so decisions can be properly understood and challenged when necessary. We also recommend that Cabinet requires that IIG meetings are consistently detailed and called in evidence to be considered. So ultimately, there's a consensus on the opinion, but they would just like a little bit more transparency with the relevant committees. Recommendation 4. The task and finish were particularly impressed with the Cornwall model regarding its methods, determination, member involvement and allocation. obviously members can read the rest of it, but ultimately I would just like to sort of clarify that what we were meant by recommendation for perhaps it potentially be reworded to as follows. The task and finish group proposed further work be undertaken through transformation and improvement overview to look at further areas in which potentially the Cornwall model could be lessons from the Cornwall model could be learned by Shropshire Council. And we could potentially look at exploring, for example, out of town commercial developments, which we don't charge on, but or other areas. So it's simply just a point to note that we did like the work which has taken place, and if Cabinet or were particularly happy with this report, we can do further evidence and research to explore other areas which may be required revision. Following from this, recommendation 5. Town and Parish Council communications and awareness. Ongoing and regular communication guidance around SIL should be shared with the town and parish councils. So I will just note that a previous task and finish group a number of years ago ultimately concluded that letters and emails should be sent to the local parish clerks. We didn't feel that sort of recommendation would be sufficient. We recommend potentially a member's dashboard, a member's bot to be given to various clerks, better transparency, updated and transparency on the website. Many of the points which we outlined are in recommendation 5, which you can see in the report clearly said. All agreed the importance of transparency as far as T&I, and believe there need to be consistent messaging with town and parish councils. It's important to note that there is sometimes a high rotation of clerks in more rural areas. There's a lack of information carry on over a period of time. So therefore, it's important that any communication we do with town parishes and clerks needs to be long lasting and permanent. So it's not necessarily just in the form of an email, but it needs to be something which could be easily accessed by those relevant clerks and parish councillors, etc. And then just to further add, T&I emphasised balanced breakdown into place plan areas was also proposed. This agreed by officers something they can do, and are happy to explore how to do this more regularly. Perhaps we could have links to the parish clerks list or clerks network as a useful way to circulate information amongst all of them. Recommendation 6. The task and finish group propose that a button is added on the member's dashboard to give them access to most up-to-date minutes and live information. Pretty self-explanatory, all agreed. Recommendation 7, enhance communications to residents by highlighting tangible benefits from SIL-funded development. So one of the concerns is that a lot of projects are funded by SIL, but people don't know they're funded by SIL. It's a common point. As I previously outlined, 60% of IIG applications for SIL come from highways projects. That's not necessarily to say that 60% of the money which is allocated goes to highways projects, but the application, the numbers themselves. And therefore, there needs to be better communication to clarify what is funded by SIL and who to and where it goes, and potentially plaques and buildings, etc. All agreed importance, T&I, and consistent messaging necessary. Finally, recommendation 8. The task and finish group proposed that work is further undertaken through the Transformation Improvement Scrutiny Overview Committee to explore how the management and administration still might be undertaken by community boards under new arrangements. These could be member-led with officers, with the support of officers. So all are in favour, but I will sort of just outline that it is important. I think Dawn has previously raised comments that it's just important that we don't undermine parish or town councils with community boards. So it needs to be, the purpose needs to be very clear so people understand its role. Town and parish councils are where, further to that point, it's just important to also note, to explain to members how communities impacted by the developments could potentially have a say and be sort of community-led boards. Links, there are links, direct links from community-led boards to partnership working with town and parish council workshops, on which these have been in frequent conversation. So, in other words, those are the 8 recommendations we put forward, and I've outlined the reasons behind our determination and our processes.
Thank you, Greg. I'm sure you'd need a glass of water now. But thank you. That was a very full roundup of the work you've done. And I think Dawn may want to just add a few bits and pieces so that Cabinet are fully aware of where you've been from and what happened at T&I. Although you did cover that, Greg. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are some concerns around the changing of this 90-10 split to increase the strategic proportion. And we do need to emphasise that any change must not disadvantage the towns and communities that bear the direct impacts of major developments. So towns such as Bridgnorth, which will be significantly affected by large-scale growth, including the upcoming Tasley projects, must receive sufficient local SIL or an equivalent ring-fenced mitigation allocation to fund the additional infrastructure required. So we would like clarity from Cabinet, because this does seem to have now been referred to you to make the final decision, although I know other members of that task and finish group are under the impression that it's going to go back to them with more information. So if you are going to change this, we ask that Cabinet puts in safeguards so that if they decide to increase the strategic share, we want to know how they will ensure that local communities directly impacted by these sorts of large-scale developments in their area still receive sufficient funding. We would ask Cabinet to commit that where a development creates demonstrable additional demand, so highway, schools, health, drainage, community facilities, a defined minimum level of SIL will be retained locally for mitigation and delivery. The discussion about cross-boundary fairness, we'd like to know how Cabinet will ensure that towns affected by development in neighbouring areas or wards, for example Bridgnorth, which is going to directly take all the brunt of the Tasley development, are eligible for local mitigation funding. Criteria and transparency, so, you know, Greg did make some amendments to that to ensure that it isn't just Cabinet and the portfolio holder, but all members have access to this information via scrutiny committees. So with minutes and things being put there.
Yeah, I will try and get down on paper what we've said in terms of my recommendations
of how we proceed with
it. Okay. Can I ask with that, because as a benefit of the town and parish council work, we have now got an up-to-date list of all our town and parish council clerks. And we are therefore in a position where we should be able to very easily and proactively send this kind of information out to these people, particularly when we get the single point of contact in place. So I wanted to say, with regard to scrutiny all member visibility, thank you very much, Greg, for the amendment that you put in there. Really, the last one, and this does come back to a lot of the information and the feeling that we got from towns and parish councils. So with regards to recommendation 8, we support Cabinet's desire for greater member and town and parish council involvement in SIL allocation decisions. But here we ask that Cabinet build into whatever system is ultimately decided on very clear and specific processes to ensure that this is local members and town and parish councils can genuinely, that's the important word here, influence allocation priorities and spending decisions. What we don't want, and this is how they are feeling, what we don't want is a process that in effect means members are consulted, or town and parish councils are consulted after decisions have in effect already been made. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think quite a bit of that was actually covered in what Greg had said, but if you can forward that to us, Dawn, that would be very useful. There are a number of issues there. Task and finishes are often set up to inform rather than make decisions for Cabinet, and it gives us the basis. So you've done all the work, and then we can discuss that and come forward with something that comes back to Cabinet, which is fair. And as you know, transparency is one of those vital things. And the reason that the task and finish was set up was because not only is SIL and its allocation complex, but it was far from transparent. In fact, you had no idea how it was being implemented, who was implementing it, and the parishes frequently were very, very upset by all of that. Certainly mine were. So that's why the task and finish was set up. It was an informative task and finish so that we can use all that work, especially around Cornwall and Cheshire East, I think, so that we have a balance to look at and we can look at your recommendations. I think Dave might respond and then Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, as I said, because we had the meeting on Monday, I said at the meeting that it's critically important for the SIL to be transparent, because part of the philosophy behind SIL is that it's to people can see the benefit of development, they see what they can get back, and then that essentially helps them buy into future development. That's part of the philosophy, the way that it's all structured. And I've said to officers for a while, it's important that we have a feedback loop so communities actually understand what they've got from SIL, and there's no real transparency about that at the moment. But no, I just need to thank all the members of the Task and Finish group and T&I for the comprehensive work they've done on it. Cornwall's definitely a good model. It's much more granular, which is something I want to see. So rather than have a uniform thing over the whole county, we can tailor it so it does different things in different places to meet specific needs locally, rather than having a broad brush. So it's something we'll take away everything that's been said, and we'll come back and give it proper consideration. Really, it's.
I think Rosemary wants to ask something, and then I'll go to Georgia.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, just more of a statement, but a bit of a question too, please. When the Task and Finish, thanks to the Task and Finish for doing this work, by the way, I think it's absolutely critical area for us all. When we say it needs to be more transparent, it is actually defined by opacity. What we have is an opaque system, and it seems to be that by design to me. And I speak as a councillor for 4 years for the Triple Division, which covers the east and southeast of Shrewsbury, home to 12,000 homes in 2014, and also home to over 2,000 new homes developed between that period, 2014, and still ongoing. I can assure you that there's absolutely no one that lives in that division, or the past division and the divisions that it now is, who feels the benefit to them of that development. Absolutely nothing. All of this road safety measures are mostly the things that were requested of SIL. And I'll just say, I'm not talking about my own case. I am talking about my own casework here, but I'm saying it as one of 74 members because I know I'm not alone. I might be alone in terms of the scale of development. So we've had almost nothing in terms of road safety improvements when we've had a huge increase in local traffic and through traffic during that period. So I am delighted to hear that Cabinet's going to be looking at this and working to change it. My criticism, by the way, is not of officers. It's a criticism of the policy which officers are required to carry out. I would also ask that we consider, if it can be, that Cabinet considers the management of S106 related to larger developments, because that has also failed dramatically. In my own experience, monies, in one case, £250,000 delivered by developers for road structure improvements needed for the 1,000 new homes that are going to be in that place, one specific place. The work just not done. Now, it's not an easy thing to resolve. It's our road and Network Rails bridge, but nonetheless, it hasn't been done. The money's been paid. It hasn't been done. And also walking paths also paid for, not been done. So I think S106 is also important, and it's adjacent to SIL, and I think it's absolutely essential that we look at fairness and transparency, community involvement, which we get through our councillors. Councillors know the local area, they know what the issues are, and that has to be done in some way. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. I think that was really important points there, and actually making sure there is delivery in those areas that have taken the development is a very important part of it, which is what Dave has already outlined. And certainly in rural areas, we see very little delivery at all. But it's also important where you have no development being allowed, which we have in 2 whole divisions, not 9, that actually we can share it across the board, so that those divisions where we can't have delivery at the present time because of the River Clun, still get some upgrades as well. So that needs to come. There's a whole range of things we need to look at. And we need to look at the prioritisation and the policy around how it's allocated, especially around road safety, which seems to have been a thing that was almost passed over. So there are all sorts of issues around that. Dan.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is an excellent piece of work by the Task and Finish Group. I'm really impressed with how thorough it is, and I'm really impressed with all the recommendations. On recommendation 1, I particularly agree that the definition of local shouldn't be, as the report states, just the member. I mean, in Much Munlock, we've got Buildwist Power Station, which is a big development. You've got the Tasley Bridge North developments, which are on the wrong side of Bridge North for Much Munlock. So we're getting S106 money, but still money I think would be fair based on the impact. I agree with the recommendation 2, 3. With 4, 100% agree with the Cornwall model. I think it looks really, really good. And particularly with the devolution that we're working on, I think it's important that town and parish councils do have more of a say in that allocation, because we're asking them to take services, or the administration is asking them to take services, and it's only fair that they get much more of a say in SIL as well, which I think is fantastic. Recommendation 5, 6 and 7 is really good. And I think recommendation 8 also sticks out as something that's really interesting. It's almost as if the old district councils that we used to have were a good idea. And then perhaps even that is the map for those boards that you set up, perhaps. And that could be looked at.
Thank you. Useful comments, Dan. Do you want to finish this now? Because it's part of your portfolio.
Yeah, it is. And it does provide cash availability to answer some of the questions and needs of the local community, and the transparency has been missing for some time, and I've raised it for a number of years under the previous administration, time and time again, that parish councils of whatever level, even Shrewsbury Town Council is a parish council, parish councillors need to know what is happening to the funds that have been generated by development in their area, because when it was introduced, it was to provide and help meet the needs of that community caused by that development. And really, it's been very, very opaque. So I welcome this report, and it is a way forward. And I echo everything that Councillor Walker is actually saying. We do need to make changes and involve members and put in better communication.
Thank you. My deputy leader would also like to make a comment. You know what I'd really like is a plaque on something, if we've got a crossing or whatever, which says funded by SIL.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to a couple of things that I don't think we necessarily have. One of which was on Councillor Hoosman and Thomas' comment, I think, about making local. I mean, what links Pulverbatch, Leighton, Upper Astley, Stanwardine in the Wood and Melverley, all lovely places. They're also all part of the Shrewsbury SIL local place plan. So, you know, I mean, the idea that SIL local is currently spent on your street or in your area is a nonsense. You know, if someone develops in Western Lullingfields, that money is part of the Shrewsbury local pot out of the 18. You know, if someone develops on the Telford border at Leighton. So the idea that the local thing is currently local doesn't quite work, and we've been quite uncomfortable with a lot of things in the process discussed. That's one of them that I just wanted to highlight. And when we bring back to cabinet stuff about the 90-10 split and the local strategic, local doesn't currently mean on your street, in your town, on your estate. Local means a pretty vast area in some cases, and actually tying those things together I think is quite important. I just wanted to end though on a lot of the recommendations there are about process and about delivery. I know delivery wasn't touched on, it might be in future by scrutiny, but we have a lot of concerns coming to us as cabinet and local members. Councillor Dartner was just referencing about the schemes being delivered or not. Schemes which ought to have been part of plans or were promised or funded or were even designed but not implemented. A lot of those schemes are years old, and actually we start getting into all sorts of trouble when we're holding on to money from SIL and 106s which we haven't spent on capital projects. There are a number of these issues, as well as the issues with just that simple, what is our strategy, where are we allocating it, what is the theory behind it. We as a cabinet will be bringing some proposals to the May Full Council about strengthening that scrutiny function. overall, particularly with regard to SIL schemes, 106 schemes, and the way that we're managing development. I think it's a much more salient issue than it was, partly due to national housing targets increasing very significantly. But we also just see across the board these issues coming to cabinet questions, coming up in members' casework. Scrutiny have done a brilliant job of highlighting it here, but I think actually what they've gone to show is that this could be a rolling programme of trying to sort of continuously improve the way the council functions, rather than something that is wholly kept at the cabinet level. So we will have some conversations, but we're working on some proposals to bring to May, the sort of annual meeting, which we hope will strengthen that function considerably and mean that those recommendations about regular reporting back and regular scrutiny can be properly met. And not met in an ad hoc way, met in a more formal way. So look forward to those next month. I think a month today.
Thank you. If there's nothing else in the room, I think we've got lots to think about, and I'm actually very eager to take part in looking at this, because it's, one, it was part of our manifesto, but two, it's been the most annoying thing for me in opposition that I've ever seen. Because we had no contact, and even where my parishes had actually bid in for something to happen, it never happened. So it's not just how we allocate, it's then how those work streams work afterwards. So there are a whole range of things. So Cabinet, I have a proposal for acceptance of further work. Okay, and a seconder, thank you. All those in favour? Great, thank you. We now move on to the next scrutiny item, which is partnership working task and finish, which does overlap with this a bit. And I'll ask Dawn Hoosman to give us a verbal update, please.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Cabinet. I'm here to provide a short and final verbal update on the Task and Finish Group's engagement with town and parish councils relating to the devolution of street scene services. I'll provide a brief overall summary of the key findings, conclusions and recommendations now that the final workshop, which was held in Shrewsbury, has been completed. This focuses particularly on how we engage, how we communicate and how officer behaviour will determine whether devolution succeeds. Key findings. So across the workshops, the message from town and parish councils has been consistent and candid. Very candid. Genuine engagement must happen early. Councils are clear that consultation after decisions have basically been made is not only ineffective, it is seen as pointless and in many cases insulting. If we want buy-in, we must involve them while options are still open and before positions harden. They want, quite reasonably, open, honest, two-way communication. Where information is partial, late, inconsistent or overly technical, it fuels mistrust and disengagement. The councils asked for a clear narrative, consistent terminology and straightforward routes to get answers quickly. Trust and officer attitudes really matter. A recurring theme is that relationships with officers can feel remote, transactional, or even dismissive. The way officers engage with town and parish councillors, so respect, responsiveness and willingness to co-design will be critical in determining the success of the devolution programme and in effect the wider partnership programmes. Data quality and transparency are currently a barrier. Councils challenge the accuracy and provenance of some street scene data and want a shared data audit so that everyone is working from the same facts. Capacity and capability vary greatly, so a one-size-fits-all devolution will not work. Local circumstances, staffing, geography and whether a council holds the general power of competency must be reflected in any model. The new information from the Shrewsbury workshop that came up, and I haven't necessarily been able to triangulate this because this is just highlighting new things that have come up, but I think you, as Cabinet, you should be aware of it. So it added several important place-specific insights, which may affect other areas, but I can't qualify that. Transport was brought up consistently by the parties that attended. And it was described as the single biggest barrier to accessing services and supporting community resilience, with specific examples of unreliable services, weak route coverage, and missing links between key settlements. There was support for exploring dial-a-ride and demand-responsive transport there as a potentially more cost-effective alternative to underused fixed routes. They did highlight taxi licensing issues. I'm not sure which cabinet member that comes under, but these were raised as a practical barrier. So delays, costs, and cross-border constraints with licensing were said to discourage drivers and complicate journeys that cross the county boundary. Digital and mobile connectivity, and we know that we all have issues around that, I think, but they brought it up, and it was framed as a safeguarding risk, particularly for elderly residents, lone workers and rural businesses. Attendees noted that masked permissions exist in places, but providers had not progressed delivery. On street scene, participants again challenged data accuracy and sought clarity on what is statutory versus non-statutory, exactly what would be devolved and how, sorry if the term comes up again, double taxation would be avoided. The group saw Oswestry as a natural hub and could point to existing examples of collaboration, but were clear that any hub and spoke model must be properly resourced and co-designed, because the administrative burden would fall heavily on hub clerks and officers. They did highlight as well that it's actually getting increasingly difficult to find qualified clerks to be able to take on this. So they identified a resource concern about the ability to take on some of these services. So conclusions. The clear conclusion from this work is that devolution will not succeed on process alone. It will succeed or fail on confidence, where the town and parish councils believe Shropshire Council is engaging with them in good faith, sharing information openly and treating them as equal partners. Where councils feel they are being asked to implement decisions rather than shape them, we should expect resistance, volunteer fatigue and disengagement. Conversely, where we co-design with them, use trusted data and remove unnecessary bureaucracy, there is a genuine willingness to do more for their local communities. So the final recommendations, I'm asking Cabinet to endorse an approach that puts engagement quality at the centre of the programme. Please commit to early option shaping engagement. Agree that town and parish councils will be involved before preferred models are fixed, and that feedback will be evidenced in decisions. Set a standard for officer engagement, expectations of respectful, responsive, partnership-based behaviours, supported by briefing audit. We did ask for this in the first group that I made, but reiterated it. Collaboratively map services and performance baselines, and share the data. And share data transparency, which should now be really easy because we've got that list of email addresses up to date, so that everyone starts from the same facts. Please, provide clear, accept what is being proposed, what is in, out of the scope. There's still confusion around these things. The financial arrangements, using consistent terminology and plain language, which I know that the leader of the council is also terribly keen on. Put practical communication support in place. So we are looking for, I don't believe that they're in place yet, a named single point of contact for clerks with direct phone and email, plus regular updates through multiple channels, including face-to-face sessions. Only two more. 6, design locally, not one size fits all. Tailor arrangements to local capacity, geography and governance capability. Build in learning and scrutiny, which has been agreed, but I am reiterating it. So to undertake a formal review of phase 1 street scene transfers in the pilot areas 6 months after implementation, but focusing on the communication, support training, data quality and resident outcomes. So Chair, the underlying message is simple. If we want town and parish councils to step up, we must also step up by engaging early, communicating openly and ensuring our officer culture reflects the partnership we are asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. As usual, thank you for gathering all the evidence we needed to be able to move forward with what we thought. And that's the point of task and finish, is that we actually have that evidence so that we can then move that on when we can and how we can. I think I have Rob, who will just briefly talk about the transport, but very briefly, and then we'll move to Alex.
Yeah, just on transport, I think we recognise that the transport model in Shropshire has been failing for a number of years. We are restricted by government funding. We are looking to make changes and improvements where we can. There have been a number of places where we've been able to make timetable improvements to help residents, but it's not enough. And it's not happening quickly enough for my liking, but we are restricted by that government funding, but we'll make it stretch as far as it can.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Dawn. I mean, it feels like a while ago now that we had first conversations about this, and I know that a lot of time and effort and energy has gone into this cross-party, so it's massively appreciated as ever. A few things there. So, look, as I see it, this is a process. We're on a continuous improvement programme as a council, but I totally accept some of the points about improving attitudes, changing the culture, getting better at partnership, working instinctively rather than just by process. I think those are the right recommendations and we have to implement them. They're going to take time. But what I would say is that I've been pleased going through the pilots process. We had to make a decision really early about whether or not we delayed everything for a full calendar year, i.e. the 1st of April for changing contracts, or whether or not we tried to get some arrangements going with a few places this year and look to do things. I know, 8-9 months sounds like a long time, but we all know in local government things do take a fair amount of time. And I was really pleased that we did get a number of those arrangements over the line. Shrewsbury and Brazeley in particular have nearly the entire street scene function delegated to them. I was at Brazeley Annual Council earlier.
Thank you. Right, we return to the agenda, item 8, which is the Crisis Resilience Fund update, and there are references to the oil, LPG and solid fuel allocations as well. All of this money has come from central government. It is not money that's come from our budget. So, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This report gives some details on what is called the Crisis and Resilience Fund, or CRF, use its initials, and how it's going to be delivered in Shropshire. This replaces a previous fund called the Household Support Fund, which ended at the end of March. It includes, however, in this new fund, and I call it new, although it's using similar money, on how it should be used. And also it leaves local authorities to make decisions on how to be distributed. It says, though, that it should be used to provide vital support to residents who are struggling to meet essential living costs. Blanket schemes should not be used in its distribution. Shropshire has been given £3.67 million plus an additional amount of £758,558, and this last figure is for 1 year only, to help households in need of heating oil and other fuels, and need to emphasise, as the leader did, other fuels. People quote oil, but there are also LPG and all the other fuels that some residents in Shropshire use. It does not include or expect to help those who use gas. Examples of what this funding can be used is shown in section 2.4. Support is available for individuals and families who are experiencing short-term financial pressure or an unexpected drop in income. As just stated, the rules set by government means this funding cannot be used to fund distribution of mass vouchers. Consequently, we are unable, as many authorities are, to use it to fund school holiday vouchers. We have, however, found a way to fund them over the Easter holidays, which have just finished, and also the school's May half-term holidays. Officers have worked with partners, including the voluntary and community sector, which will provide the needed additional capacity to support budgeting, income maximisation, and support in claiming benefit and entitlement to offer support to those. More information is shown in sections 2.5 and 2.6 of the report and in the attached appendix. Due to the critical nature of some schemes and timescales of the announcements, certain decisions were made prior to this report being agreed. These are listed in section 5.6. A CRF working group has been set up to oversee day-to-day delivery and monitoring of the plan, with routine reporting to the Section 151 officer and me. A further paper will be brought to the Cabinet in 6 months' time with an updated delivery plan and will incorporate any changes that need to be made. Many staff of all areas have worked long hours together in bringing this forward without undue delay, and I say a big thank you to them. I also draw attention to the statements made at 3.3 and the no wrong door approach, plus the promise made at 7.2 that where needed, delivery of crisis payments within a 48 target window will be met. Efforts are being made to keep bureaucracy to a minimum, and even where really payments are rejected, some basic information can be made on a same-day basis. I move the recommendations listed as sections 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Bruce will second. Thank you. And would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this this paper and the funding that's come through from government, and I really want to echo the thanks that Councillor Evans has made to the hard work that staff have done to pull this together so quickly, because it's absolutely essential to support those vulnerable people in our communities, many of whom tick along very happily until there's a crisis, something goes wrong, the washing machine breaks, or as we're seeing now, the cost of petrol and heating oil is significantly higher. I do have one very small ask, and it won't be a surprise to Rachel, but the communications around this are going to be critical. I do feel that all of us as elected members have a role to play in that in our local communities and making sure this information gets out. And I just make a small ask for a very small quantity of some printed material that can go into some of our food banks, our early years settings, where we can meet those vulnerable families who need something to take away, digest at home and go back and follow up.
I think a PDF as well for elected members so we can print them when we need them will be also very useful. And in simple terms, so it's easy to follow. Thank you. Do I have anybody else who wants to speak on this? Andy.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, just to reiterate what Ruth said, really, I think the message of this is very important out to the schools as well, to get this message out, to make sure that no one's missing out on this, and making sure that those who do actually need the support, it gets to the core of it. And again, as you say, the message actually is good to come from our communities via our members as well.
I think the issue around no longer being able for the summer holidays, for instance, to provide food vouchers to families who are on free school meals is an important one, and where they can go if they really need that. It's about targeting, and it's about the government wanting to target the people who really need the help rather than those people who get the help even when they don't need it. So it's making sure those people have the help where they can get it, but from a different source. anything else that we need? It's really important piece of work, this, all of it. And we had no guidance at all around the oil. So we've had to find ways and means to deliver that one through a community resource and through our own, as you will have seen in the appendix. And Shropshire Local and all of these areas will be able to help. We don't have a phone number in that for people that I can find at the present time, but people will want to ring, people will want to do face-to-face, but the PDF and the leaflet will be really important, and I'm sure we can find a way through that one quite quickly. Anything else? It's a real shame because it's so important, this one, for our very rural, low-wage area. Roger.
If I can, Chairman, if I can appeal to all members to make themselves familiar with the Appendix 1, so when they are approached and know something there, to actually tell that person, and there is no wrong door. So talk to anybody.
I think also 2.3 and then 2.4 on the report are vitally important, because it gives you some areas where people can get help and support, which is around food and water, housing costs, energy bills, school uniforms. There's a whole range of things there. It's not exhaustive. There are other things, and I know certainly through being a Vice Chair of Governors, but also from a conversation yesterday, there are families now struggling to pay for their childcare, because without the childcare they can't work. So there are issues around those as well. So I think we will need to be flexible about some of this, and childcare is expensive. But what we don't need is people not being in work because they can't afford the childcare. And certainly my federation face that regularly, or face breakfast clubs not being affordable. And they're not paying for them, and then the school is in a difficult position because they know that mum can't go to work unless they're in breakfast clubs, and ours are not being funded free at the present time. So there are a range of things that, because of fuel prices and so on going up, are putting more stresses on families who are in work, and we need to keep people in work. Roger.
Yeah. One last comment. There's so much help is only provided if you are in receipt of some sort of benefit. You do not need to be receiving any sort of benefit to actually claim this.
But there will be a process behind it, so that not anybody can claim. It's those people who can prove they're in real need. I think that's the most important thing. This money has to be targeted at those who are in real need, and that's where the expertise of our staff comes into consideration. Rachel.
Yeah, just to apologies that the numbers are all on the links if you follow them, but I will get them round to people, including the leaflets and information that you want. There's a huge amount of information there available. There is previous leaflets, but we'll absolutely get those round and pick up those recommendations around, making sure we print those out. So that I was trying to put the number in the chat, but I'll get it round to you now so you've got it, and we'll get it out in the members gateway as well, and more broadly, because as we've said, there's a huge amount of information in here, and the collaboration across, as colleagues have said, particularly with the voluntary sector and to the experts in these areas around reaching our most vulnerable communities, is absolutely critical to the way that this has been managed. And so just a huge thank you to everybody who's given their time to be involved in that, from office point of view, but particularly from our partners in the community and voluntary sector who've put a lot of time into this. Just thank you.
So if we move to the recommendations, if we haven't got anything more to say, Ruth, were you adding in a 3.4 around a few leaflets and a PDF? Okay, thank you. So I had a proposer and a seconder, I think. Was that you, Alex? I can't remember. No, it's Ruth. Yes, it was Ruth. And we've added 3.4. So are we all in favour of that, please? Yes, cool. Thank you. Unanimous. So we now move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is introduction of weekly food waste collections. And Tom is now going to present this because David couldn't be with us this morning. David Bassam.
Thank you, Chair. This report details the requirement for a weekly collection of food waste to all households in England from April 2026, set out within the Environment Act of 2021, and subsequently the simpler recycling, and provides position on the next steps. Shropshire Council has received a one-off grant of £3.6 million from DEFRA, but this is for the capital cost for the purchase of new vehicles and food waste bins required to undertake the service. As detailed in the report, the funding of the actual costs would be approximately £3.8 million to run the service in the long term. Although we had anticipated funding for this being detailed in our settlement, we did not receive any additional funding, and our settlement amount was a reduction in real terms, and now there is a need for additional revenue money required to provide the weekly food waste service. This report outlines the current issues and recommendations that we write to DEFRA with the proposed transitional arrangement that includes a retrospective exemption to defer the requirement for a weekly food waste collection to the end of the existing contract in 2039, whilst we continue to work on the outstanding contractual and financial issues of the council. As a council, we are aware that this is a responsibility that we must legally build into the organisation, but due to the lack of revenue support being put forward for the physical collection of food waste, we simply need more time to find a route that will deliver this service sustainably. And I refer Cabinet to review the findings and recommendations of the Economy and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thanks, Tom. Questions, comments? What I will also say is we really want to collect food waste. This is not, oh no, we can't do this routine and kicking it into the long grass. But given our financial situation and the lack of the collection revenue, we are forced to be where we are with the recommendations. Duncan.
Yeah, almost think of proposing for a minute's silence that we can't as a society get to a place where we can collect food waste in Shropshire, and it's a very, very sad place for Shropshire to be and for our communities to be, and I just think we need to reflect on that for a few minutes. Why are we doing this? Because kitchen waste, organic matter, is a major cause of greenhouse emissions. We talk a lot about carbon, but organic matter breaks down to methane, and that's 8 to 10 times more damaging than carbon. So it's a very significant element if we're going to do anything to mitigate the impact of climate change. I think this report crosses the Rubicon. I've never seen a report to this council, or indeed any other council, that says the council is not going to comply with the law. I know we're going to trying to seek an exemption, but as we sit here at the moment, we haven't got an exemption, and the law requires us to have this service. So that's a very poor precedent for the council to be in, at a time when we're trying hard to work out what the minimum viable service provision is. Here is a service where we're significantly below what the minimum viable service provision. It is, and I understand, it's a dreadful inheritance for yourselves as a controlling group. We've got under-resourcing from a Labour government. I think they've been offered around 800 grand of revenue for a service which I think provisionally you've estimated around £3.5 million. That seems significant under-resourcing. And we've had a situation where the previous Conservative administration didn't prioritise this and didn't even go to the extent of seeking an exemption from this either. So it seemed to just walk away from the issue. And in that time, we've lost an awful lot of time when we could have been sitting down with the contractor and working out a practical solution to do something which our public actually want to see. I am disappointed to see that we haven't still got the full costs. I see in the report reference, as I said, to some provisional costs. But I would have hoped that by this stage, a year on, we would have actually worked out what the full costs are, because it doesn't help us in campaigning to government and to other agencies to not have actually nailed exactly what the costs are. It sort of looks as though we haven't done our due diligence either. There must be a risk to the council. If we're not going to do this, we'll have to repay some of the money that's already been allocated to us. Presumably, if we're not going to implement this to 2039, I'm not sure the government's going to be happy to have taken 800 grand in revenue and £3.5 million in capital if we're not going to provide the service. So I don't know if the risk there or not. We need to make aware that many other councils already do this. In fact, the majority of councils already are collecting food waste prior to the implementation of this Act. councils have come to advise us, like Somerset, have had this in place in train for years, as has Metro Wales. So when it says in the report this is primarily a result of contractual and financial constraints, I have to challenge and say, I think it's also due to political choices that have been made in the past regarding what we spend our money on. And that's not to say that the wrong choices, but it's just to say we can't evade the situation that we had opportunity in the past to do something about this. I think to defer until 2039 is an appalling answer to this situation. I clearly would be very aghast that our residents have to wait 13 years for something that other residents in the country are expecting and the government has legislated for. Thank you.
I think that Laura will explain some of this to you in just a minute. But what you will also know, Duncan, is that as leader of South Shropshire District Council, we did have complete food collection in the south before we went unitary. And that went on until green waste charging happened, when you couldn't actually then charge for food waste to be collected. So this is not that we're not fully committed to it. It also affects our recycling rates, not just the impact of methane and all the rest of it. So there are a whole range of things, which makes me very sad that we're in this position. Really sad indeed. So Laura.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Councillor. I think just in relation to the 2039 date, I think just to be clear, that is a backstop position whilst we work through this transition period and work to, a position where we will be able to move to a weekly collection. A lot of work has been done to date modelling this. We believe at this stage it's around about 3.8 million, as you'll see in there. So that is a 3.8 million ongoing annual revenue pressure that would be placed upon our budgets if we put this in place. We were up until September last year. We had a letter. We received a letter to say we would receive this additional funding as part of our settlement, which we did not get. And obviously you'll be aware from the previous discussion around what settlement we got, and actually it was even a reduction, and that is continuing to be a reduction. So we are very unique to other local authorities in the sense we've got a very complex PFI contract that we've got to negotiate. We have got a huge rurality county, of which it costs more to deliver these services. Again, going back to previous points that have been raised as part of our budget pressures. I just want to again reiterate the leader and Councillor Tom Dainsey's point is that we are committed to do this. We are committed to get this in place, and we will be working at pace to look at how we can ensure that our budgets are aligned and we can do that. The complexity with the PFI contracts, we will have additional legislation that's coming out, so we need to look at the whole picture and the whole complexity around that and look at what we can do around those collections along with everything aside of that. I think Shropshire has been very open and transparent, I have to say, in terms of food waste. If you look at other local authorities, sometimes been very quiet. You'll see that from the recent BBC news article, we are not the only ones in this position. In fact, some other local authorities have chosen not to comment on where we are, and others, whether they've got a few months delay, years delay, they are coming at it at very different points as well. So it is a very complex situation, and I think it's really difficult to compare apples and pears across this with other local authorities because of the position that Shropshire is in. And at that point, looking at it historically, we wouldn't have known we were going to be in this position with EFS and the amount of borrowing that we've had to go for. We are really mindful of putting any additional budget pressure on the local authority at this stage. I think it's really fundamental that we go through everything to ensure that we try and mitigate any of those additional pressures. We have got the additional issue with the IVC development, which is the investor composter. That's as part of the contract that we also need to look at. We have got planning permission in at this stage for that, and once we know the outcome of that, we'll be able to look at that timescale as well as other things as well. Is that case? Does that answer your questions? But I do take your points. Thank you.
Is there anything anybody else wants to add? Rosemary.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my comments might have been best before Laura spoke, but Just saying, for me, it's as Duncan has said, really, we're in an interesting scenario. We depend on the government for EFS, and I'm sure that's not a conversation that's completed. It's a conversation I'm sure that's ongoing. And there we are, non-compliant on a very serious matter, really. And I just think that pre-2000, so in summer up to September 2024, we were collecting food waste with the green waste system. 97,000 out of 140,000 homes in Shropshire. So to me, that decision was queried at the time by some of us in opposition, and probably with Roger at the time. It's a massively short-term decision that we've made, because we've chosen to go for green waste charging, which meant we had to stop that, as Heather said earlier, stop collecting green waste from customers, residents, in order to keep that green waste charge legal. So it's a shocking situation to be in. And I'd note that our colleagues in the Environment and Communities, Environment and Economy Committee, Scrutiny and Overview Committee, recommended that we try to combine a food collection service with our green waste collection, so that we collect food waste from everybody while we're collecting from paying customers. And I don't see why that hasn't been developed, because that must surely be a more economical way forward.
I've got the Vice Chair of Economic and Environment Scrutiny online. So Sam, would you like to say where you got to, and then I think Laura and I can both explain why we haven't been able to take that forward? Sam.
Yes, thank you. So this was subject of much conversation at the Economy and Environment meeting in January, and many of the issues that have already been raised today came up. Having worked through quite a lot of questions, we ended up choosing between three options. One was essentially do nothing, to say we haven't got enough money, we're not going to make these collections until the government fund them. The second was that we would start collections alongside green waste bins that are already going on. So those customers who have green waste bins could put food waste in, or they would have the option of a kitchen caddy, and everyone who doesn't pay for a green waste bin would be issued with a kitchen caddy, and those could be collected as part of the rounds that are already going on. And the final option was to just say, okay, we know we're struggling for the revenue funding, but we will just go ahead with implementing the weekly collections. In the vote at the end of the discussion, there was an even split, with 4 people choosing option 1, do nothing, and waiting for funding from the government to come through, and 4 voting for introducing collection of food waste as part of the green bin collections every fortnight as an interim measure until we could move to the legally required weekly collections. Read through the paper that's been put together for Cabinet today, and there's mention of further investigation since our meeting in January, and that some options are now not considered feasible. So I suspect that impacts on the recommendations we had put forward, but that's certainly where we were at the end of January when we discussed it.
That's very useful. Thank you, Sam. And I think the amount of work that you've done around that is useful in the background and makes the situation we're in even more sad. I think Tom wants to come in, but then I think we will talk a bit more around why we couldn't implement the green waste and food collection as every other week, which would have been a start towards it. And there are reasons why we can't do that, Tom.
Yeah, I would add that Duncan is correct that many councils have been able to provide the service, but 1 in 4 councils in the UK are going to miss the deadline. We are not unique. It is quite a large pool. And additionally, the government has come out and said that they will not go to judicial review for councils that are missing the deadlines. We're not, as a council, going to be punished any further because we missed this deadline. We now have an opportunity to make sure we do it responsibly, so that it's sustainable for the future, and we do not put this council under any more duress in a position of financial turmoil. So, you know, the opportunity is there. We just have to get it right.
Thank you. Laura, would you like to explain why we can't do what the second recommendation that actually I would have supported?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Scrutiny, it's a split vote, and I think it just shows that the level of complexity that we've got here. Obviously for a fortnightly collection and the green waste, there's people are paying for a said service, aren't they, for the green waste? And I think there, in its first instance, lies an issue because we've got an equitable issue across the county in terms of a collection. The other element of that since scrutiny is that we, as part of the contract, in 2015, a variation was done to the contract, which showed that subject to the development of an IVC, the collection of the fortnightly collection would exclude Oswestry and Bridge North, of which at that point we said we can't do that. We can't have an equitable position where some of collections are done across the county and others are not. It's not fair. Hence why we're coming today to say the position is we need to continue those conversations with the contractor and we need to look at how we model this to ensure we've got consistent practice for all residents across the county. And I think that's been very much a consistent view of the administration around that. And that's hence why we'll be slightly delayed from that position.
There are other questions around that, and I remember at the very first meeting that Laura, David and I had with Veolia right at the start, we were pressing them about having a planning application in about the IOC, which they now have put in, and it's not in Shropshire, which is quite interesting. They should have been doing this long in advance, in my opinion. But they now have done that. So there are all sorts of issues around that contract that have made this actually much more difficult. And I think I can say that and Laura can't. So by the puzzled look on your face, Rosemary, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I have many questions, but I'll try to keep it to one. Just to, I don't know whether you said Bridge North or Broseley and Oswestry. Why were those towns impossible to be included?
Sorry, it's just historic in the contract, so I could see, Rosemary, and that's what the contractors come back and signalled. So that's why we're going through and having said conversations and trying to negotiate that moving forward.
And I think that historically they were not collecting food waste from those districts.
That's my understanding, yes. Yeah.
So in 2015, that for some reason that was included as a variation in the contract. So we could still collect if we wanted from South Shropshire, North Shropshire and what was Shrewsbury and Atcham. But we can't do the rest. It's a mess then. It's a real mess. So it's an 11-year-old contract variation that's made this even more difficult, because even if we could do it every other week, it would be a real bonus, but it wouldn't even be for everybody every other week. So it's a nightmare. So
just what came up in the E&E meeting about certainly Bridge North was that whereas much of Shropshire waste can be collected and taken directly to the site where it will ultimately be composted or otherwise treated, in Bridge North it was being collected and then taken to an intermediate site for storage. So I think that's the specific problem that arose. Why it can't be overcome, I'm less clear on, but there was location and logistics were why Bridge North was being treated differently.
Okay. Is that the case, Laura? I presume it is.
It's the capacity, isn't it? I mean, we've got green waste and food waste collections, and I think that's the issue, is that without the additional IVC, capacity to do all of Shropshire's waste, that's the main issue. So we need to look at how we develop that. Otherwise, I mean, we can we are asking for additional costings because the waste can be taken elsewhere, but then there's obviously complications as a result of that as well. So it's just which way we go with it, really. What's the best option? And that's why we just need those few more months now to see whether we get the planning permission for the IBC, which I believe it's at Whitchurch, isn't it?
It is outside the county.
It's just outside the county, yeah. So it's with the Welsh application, the planning application, and not Shropshire's. And then we can then make a decision which will come back to Cabinet then in terms of the next steps.
And just to reassure Duncan, I really do not want this deferred till 2039 because it's not something that I can support, but it has to be around that deferment. And I know Westmoreland and Furness have got deferment. There are a whole load of rural counties that have got deferment, and it is 1 in 4. So it's obviously not something that's just hit us, but we have no flexibility in our budget just to pick up that, which is a real problem. And it's not something we've taken to the improvement board, but I can't see the improvement board being very keen for us to extend our drawdown of EFS. And that would have to be on a yearly basis at the present time because we don't have the funding in our base budget. So if there's nothing else anybody wants to ask, if we look at the recommendations, which are for noting only, and that's A, B, C, I can't remember whether it was a D or not. D, yes, E, F, G, H, and I over the page. Can we note those, please? With the understanding, pardon?
Second part is to instruct.
And the second part, yes, E, F, G, H, and I are for instructing the service director for place shaping to undertake the further work and so on, which we need to do, and that will then obviously come back in July 26 so that we know exactly what's going on. But I would just like you to understand that we are pushing this forward where we can, but contractual and financial issues are rather making life difficult for us. So I have a proposer. I don't have a proposer because Tom can't. Rosa and a seconder, Roger. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Right. We now need to move on to item 10, which is Shrewsbury Town Centre Design Code. And we've got an updated Appendix 1 and 3 on the website. So it's not necessarily the one we've all had, but it is updated on the website. David Walker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there is. It does say April 26 on the cover if you're trying to work out which is the event. This report is brought to Cabinet to approve adoption of the Shrewsbury Town Centre Design Code to provide guidance on the application of the local plan policies and form a material consideration in the planning decision-making process. Shropshire Council has created this design code through its involvement as one of 25 local authorities funded by MHCLG Design Code Pathfinder programme, and now, as a result of this code, Shropshire Council has a template it can use for other market towns across Shropshire who want to consider such an approach. It's been subject to significant public consultation, and this has strengthened key areas such as more explicit reference to the town centre wide conservation area, further explanation around accessibility and inclusive design, and ensuring all networks connect. It also provides links to a glossary to support agreed definitions and terms. This is a key tool in delivering the Shrewsbury Big Town Plan through the adoption of this design code as a material consideration in the determination of planning applications that supports officers and committees with their decision making while providing developers with certainty and reducing ambiguity. Shrewsbury Town Centre is a truly special place, shaped by its historic streets, landmark buildings and close relationships to the River Severn. This design code is about protecting that character while giving clarity and confidence to those bringing forward new development. By setting clear, locally distinctive design expectations, we can raise the quality of development, support good decision making and ensure that future changes in the town centre respect what makes Shrewsbury unique. Additional supplementary planning documents, SPDs, providing design guidance on new residential development and residential extensions for all of Shropshire will be considered at Cabinet in June. Just should point out that Claire's online. If there are any particular questions or clarification you want, but I would like to take the opportunity of thanking Claire and the team for the work they've done to bring forward a pretty good, solid piece of work and policy document.
Thank you, David. Anybody need to raise anything? Dawn.
I've had some significant concerns about this raised by my Shrewsbury team that they wanted me to bring up. So, Chair, I want to raise some concerns about the consultation referred to in the draft Shrewsbury Town Centre Design Code. These concerns sit within a wider pattern that many residents have raised with us about the quality of consultation and data collection on major council-led town centre and transport proposals. The report tells us that consultation ran for 13 weeks and Councillor Walker has just said that this proposal had been subject to significant public consultation, but it resulted in just apparently 25 responses from members of the public. Whilst I acknowledge the length of the consultation period, the very low level of response does raise questions about awareness, reach and how effectively residents were engaged. It is also notable that those who did respond raised serious issues about accessibility, car parking, pavement quality, safety, and the impact on disabled residents, older people, families, and those who rely on car access. These are not minor points, they go to the heart of how people experience the town centre. Separately, a locally run Big Town Plan questionnaire has already received around 200 responses. Whilst this is not a formal council exercise, it does suggest that residents are willing to engage when they are aware of what is being proposed and feel their views are being actively sought. My concern is that significant changes to the town centre, including assumptions about traffic reduction and behaviour change, risk being progressed without a sufficiently robust evidence base, particularly in the absence of supporting infrastructure such as the North West Relief Road. I would therefore urge Cabinet to reflect carefully on whether the consultation and engagement underpinning this work was strong enough and whether further, more meaningful engagement with residents should take place before these proposals are taken forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Do you want to reply?
It's the same with any consultation. You're beholden to the people who actually participate. If you look at the local nature recovery strategy consultation, that was a very strong response to that. But so, like I say, you're stuck with what people come forward with, and if they come forward with the wrong answers to the wrong questions that aren't even in the thing, then you still have to deal with those responses. But in terms of infrastructure and other things, this is more about design and feel. It's not about the infrastructure. That's a separate thing, and some of that stuff's going to have to be covered in the local plan and supplementary planning around that. So there's ample opportunity to feed in more stuff over and above any of this, and indeed in terms of Big Town Plan and other, there's multiple avenues to build into this. It's not designed to be a catch-all for every single shred of policy around Shrewsbury.
Need to ask anything else?
No, I mean, I think the point that they're making is that whilst this is about design code at this stage, there's just fundamental concerns about the level of engagement and them basing decisions upon that very low level of engagement. That was, I think, what they were trying to get across. Thank you.
I think the level of engagement actually, it depends on what you're looking at. So I think the big town plan had 2,400 people reply. So, you know, different areas have had different input. Rosemary.
Yeah, thank you. In 2024, January 2024, the Shrewsbury Movement and Open Space Strategy received 1,400 respondents from 70,000 people living in Shrewsbury, which I think is quite impressive, actually. I think the largest response I've known of since I've been a councillor was 1,300 people across the whole of Shropshire responding to a bus survey in about 22, I think. So it's quite impressive.
Alex,
just very quickly on the design code point, rather than some of the other connected, interesting but not what we're looking at in the report things. Actually, we're really talking about design of the new and how new things fit into the town centre. The primary example of that, if you look at the the kind of available sites, is actually one in Shropshire Council's own possession. It's the Riverside. I think the first test for the design code is going to be with the developers who end up taking on different bits of the Riverside, with the potential of a hotel there, with significant amounts of housing, with making sure that the park and the street scene blend in nicely and fit with connecting to those historic sort of arterial streets like Mardle and Rouse Hill and up to the square. I don't think I think the design code itself is about kind of working with developers and working with land that we have in our own estate to make sure that it fits Shrewsbury. I think that's admirable. For what it's worth, even though it says town centre, it's not exclusively. I raised this with my residents, who all obviously the large majority live in the area this covers, and tried to get a response. I know the residents group did reply, but I think there was kind of a view that actually it's a good, fairly uncontroversial bit of work about making sure that those new developments like the Riverside fit neatly and have some structure. I think it would be a real shame if, when we look a couple of years down the line with the Riverside, and we start getting those outline planning applications turning into full planning applications for those blocks, if they don't have some really clear guidance about what we want them to look like and how we want them to feel and how we want them to interact with the rest of the town. I think it would be a shame to leave that kind of totally with the market, as opposed to having a bit of control. I think this gives us a bit of control, and I'm quite happy with it. And people I've spoken to in the town centre appear to be reasonably content as well. So the Riverside will be an interesting case study, actually probably the first and most significant case study the design code will have.
Thank you. What I do know is people usually only really get engaged with these things when there's a planning application in front of them, and that's when you get a huge input if they don't like it. Anyway, so I have presumably a proposer that we approve the adoption of Shrewsbury Town Design Centre, Shrewsbury Town Centre Design Code.
I'm happy to propose it.
Thank you. And a seconder. Thank you, Rob. All those in favour of that? Thank you. Unanimous. We therefore move on to the adoption of the Destination Management Plan, which is item 11 on the agenda. And this is Rob Wilson.
Thank you very much. This strategy sets out a clear, ambitious vision for Shropshire's visitor economy up to 2029 and how we will strengthen our offer and grow sustainably. Shaped by extensive consultation with residents, sector professionals and the wider public, the plan reflects what makes Shropshire distinctive: breathtaking landscapes, rich heritage, thriving market towns and a warm welcome. Last year, we welcomed more than 10 million visitors, generating over £900 million for the local economy and supporting more than 9,000 jobs. The latest report confirms that the visitor economy in Shropshire has now surpassed £1 billion in value, clear evidence of the sector's strength and potential. Our destination management plan is about creating a lasting future for our communities and places, not just increasing visitor numbers. We need to grow tourism in a way that is sustainable, accessible and inclusive, increasing overnight stays, improving accessibility and championing regenerative tourism so visitors and residents both benefit. Priorities include responsible tourism, more service accommodation, better transport and more family-friendly attractions, while safeguarding our environment and supporting our communities. In a number of our communities, tourism is vital for keeping the local pub and shop open. Shropshire Council, working with Visit Shropshire, local businesses, the Shropshire Hills, National Landscape and other partners, will work to deliver the plan transparently and collaboratively. We will oversee progress as we pursue external funding, strengthen partnerships and foster innovation. This is also an opportunity time to mention the Telford and Shropshire Local Visitor Economy Partnership, known as the LVEP. This will be central to delivery, bringing together local authorities, destination organisations and the tourism industry to provide leadership, share priorities and a single voice for the area. As an accredited partnership, it strengthens our ability to coordinate across urban and rural Shropshire, improve the end-to-end visitor experience and present a clear proposition to national bodies and investors. This work is already underway. We have an excellent chair in Mandy Thorne, MBE, and the board is currently being appointed. The combined value of our visitor economy with Telford is now over £1.2 billion. Together, we have a fantastic opportunity to grow this. I'm confident this strategy will strengthen Shropshire's visitor economy, support health and well-being, and help attract inward investment. By embracing regenerative tourism, we want to ensure that Shropshire is left in a better state after every visit, preserving its beauty and character for future generations. As we launch the DMP today, we celebrate the partnership and shared ambition that will guide delivery in the years ahead. To make the DMP real on the ground, we are calling on market towns, local partnerships and rural communities to develop local visitor economy action plans. These should reflect local strengths and needs, align to the DMP priorities and set out practical projects from strengthening the visitor welcome and supporting local businesses and events to tackling shared challenges such as accessibility, transport and skills. We will support and connect this work through a county-wide partnership, sharing good practice, coordinating delivery and measuring impact. I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Paul Gossage and Pauline Jones, who have done a lot of the heavy lifting, bring this excellent document together. So today I ask us to formally endorse the Destination Management Plan for Shropshire.
Right. Comments? Questions? Dawn? Surely not.
Chair, thank you. The points I want to make about the Destination Management Plan before us today are not to dismiss its ambition, but to highlight some very real risks around the evidence base, the economic context, and the assumptions being made about visitor behaviour. First, on the evidence and consultation. The consultation underpinning this plan received 84 responses over 2 months for a county-wide strategy that is intended to guide investment decisions, partnership working and funding bids through to 2029. While the quality of engagement from those who responded was often high, the scale and representativeness of the data is extremely limited. The respondent profile is heavily skewed towards older age groups and engaged stakeholders, with younger people, families, lower income households and frontline hospitality workers largely absent. That matters because those groups are among the most affected by the current cost of living pressures. And I refer you there back to item 8 on the agenda, where we're looking at a crisis management fund. They're most affected and are central to understanding how tourism actually functions on the ground. We should therefore be very cautious about leaning too heavily on headline figures such as 75% support, when in reality a small and skewed sample produces fragile percentages and a large proportion of neutral responses. Neutrality at that level usually signals uncertainty, not endorsement. Second, on delivery and objectives, the plan is clear on ambition but weak on execution. It does not set out smart, sorry guys, but you know I like my smart objectives. There is no clear delivery framework, no defined KPIs, no agreed baselines, no clarity about who is responsible for delivering what, by when, and how success will be measured. That places Cabinet in a difficult position because you are being asked to approve aspirations without the accountability mechanisms that allow your scrutiny to monitor progress or value for money. Third, and crucially, on the cost of living crisis and visitor behaviour. The plan has been developed at a time when households across the country are actively minimising discretionary spend. Days out, meals, attractions and short breaks are precisely the kind of non-essential expenditure that people are cutting back on. This is particularly important for Shropshire because most of our visitors are local or near local day trippers. They are price sensitive, they make short visits, and when money is tight, they do not stop visiting altogether, they substitute. They walk around rather than pay, picnic rather than eat out, shorten visits and avoid secondary spend. The plan assumes we can increase dwell time, encourage overnight stays and increase average spend, but that ambition cuts directly across current human behaviour. Marketing and branding cannot create disposable income. In a cost of living crisis, aspiration alone does not change spending patterns. The risk is that we end up with higher footfall but lower spend, increased pressure on toilets, parking, waste and highways, and limited benefit to local businesses, all at a time when council services are already under strain. So my concern, Chair, is not with the direction of travel, but with realism. As it stands, this plan reads more of a statement of intent than a deliverable strategy. It relies on a narrow evidence base, makes optimistic assumptions about visitor spending behaviour and lacks smart objectives needed for accountability. So the bottom line, in a period of sustained cost of living pressure, a visitor economy strategy built largely around encouraging higher spend, longer stays and enhanced experiences faces significant headwinds. Without explicitly addressing spend minimising behaviour among predominantly local day trippers, there's a real risk that the destination management plan delivers increased footfall without corresponding economic benefit while adding pressure to infrastructure and public services.
So was there a question in that, and was there a proposal?
It's to think carefully about, you know, we've got these wonderful objectives, but given the cost of living crisis that we are facing, it's not setting it up for success. It's going to make things very, very difficult. So I'm asking that you bear that in mind in the plans, and I would like to see some kind of objectives that we could measure and scrutinise against.
Well, actually, I mean, some of the basis of some of the things you said this morning, I can feel at some point in a work plan we might have to do a task and finish around consultation. Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to
the spatial development strategy showed us at Cabinet last month that we are in that grey area where government doesn't really know what to do with us, but it isn't helping us in the meantime. We do have a very small number of officers, but excellent officers who will work with our towns and parishes. I know Councillor Houston is no longer with us, but this has been through a number of the town and parish councils. I know Ellesmere Council brought forward some very useful comments about what was missing. That has been addressed following that consultation. So although it may not have a large number of direct respondents, the response that we did have, especially through stakeholders, was very valuable for making this document better. The other thing I need to make really clear is it is aligned to Telford's destination management plan, and that's really important as we move towards a local visitor economy partnership with Telford, because that's the way Visit England are arranging the country. They're going to be funding LVEPs rather than local councils to deliver the visitor economy. So it's really important we have this plan in place that's aligned to Telford, and it helps us build towards that LVEP across the border into Telford and Wrekin.
Thank you. I must say that, interestingly, I had a visit to a hillside called Stakely Common yesterday. Did you know we only have 2 stone circles in Shropshire? Both are in my division. And one of them is actually under the guardianship of the minister, because it is of the same to our B&Bs across the board. It's really important to our local pubs that are struggling in many places that we do bring people in, but we also try to manage how they access many of these sites. So in many ways, this report is very, very important, not just to the towns, it's also really important to the rural areas. And having a whole lot of mines that people come to visit, also in my division, making sure the impact of the people going there into Snail Beach, Diperstones and the bog is managed so that the people who live there are not inundated is also a really important part of it, and that happens across the whole county where you have honeypots and so on, Cardiff Mill Valley being another one. Rob.
I should just come back on Councillor Hughes' point about there being smart targets on page 4, so you don't have to go through many pages to find it. In the 3-year growth plan to 2029, the first item is adjusting the ratio of day to staying visitors, and the specific target is shifting that from a ratio from 86 to 14 to 80 to 20 by 2029. I think that is what will be considered a smart target, and there are others in there. I suppose also with the cost of living crisis and the fuel crisis we're now getting because of Donald Trump's exercises in the Middle East, I think it's likely we're going to see more people choosing to stay at home this summer to travel rather than go abroad. I think a number of airlines are cancelling flights or making them more expensive. So it is possible. I don't want to get ahead of myself. It is possible we'll see more people coming to enjoy the beautiful Shropshire Hills.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the agenda, and the date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 6th of May this year. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.